Hi everyone, I'm Samantha Adams-Becker. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Holly. I'm so happy to be here today, especially among these great panelists. I had the pleasure of serving with many of them on the NMC Horizon Report 2014 Library Edition panel, the panel that actually produced the report that a lot of these topics are based on. So really excited to be here today, have a personal affinity for this topic, for helping libraries remain relevant in a world where I know Google searches and Wikipedia searches are quite easy. So before moving on a little bit, I just want to make sure that we get an introduction and some background in everyone. And so we're going to kind of do a round robin where we hear everyone's background, and as you tell a little bit of information about yourself, if the panelists can also give the audience a sense of their involvement with increasing access and discovery, that would be fantastic. So since Kenning, since you're up on my screen right now and I can see you, let's start with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenning Arlich. I'm the Dean of the Library at Montana State University. I launched University of Utah's digitization program in 1989, and I'm the founder of the Mountain West Digital Library and the Utah Digital Newspapers program, as well as a couple of others like the Western Soundscape Archive. My current funded research is on search engine optimization and semantic web optimization for digital repositories. And my research team and I at Montana State University have published several articles and a book on the topic.
Thank you so much, Kenning. We're really pleased to have you and your perspective here today. And now moving on to the singular international perspective we have for this particular panel today. I'd like to introduce Lambert Heller. Not only is he a friend, but he was a co-principal investigator for the 2014 Library Edition and a partner in the report. So glad to have him with us here. And Lambert is the head of the Open Science Lab at TIB Hanover, all the way in Germany. So good evening, Lambert. Let's hear a little bit more about you.
Hi, Samantha. Thanks for inviting me. I hope the bandwidth issues are not so serious. So, okay. Yes, you introduced me already. Thank you for that. We are at a library, on the one hand, the central library in Germany for everything science and technology, and on the other hand, we are the university library of the university in Hanover. So my personal involvement was that we introduced open access publishing services to scientists at the University Hanover and a so-called current research information systems. And I don't know how many people heard that term already or have some picture in mind about that, what that is. It is a kind of system where you store network profiles of researchers and about what they are doing. Not only publication lists, but all kinds of activities. This is the one thing, and my other involvement that I wanted to mention is that we at an Open Science Lab in Hanover are involved with activities with Wikimedia, where we are thinking about how to get more open access licensed multimedia material into Wikipedia from researchers. So, for example, that pictures can easily be added to Wikipedia articles and stuff like that.
Thank you so much, Lambert. So happy to have you here. Next up, I'm excited to introduce you to Lisa Hincliffe, Professor and Coordinator for Strategic Planning and Coordinator for Information Literacy Services and Instruction in the University Library at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. A bit of a mouthful. I hope I got that right, Lisa. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Samantha. And my apologies that I fell off the campus network here a second ago, so hopefully I've gotten connected with a better connection now. So yes, as Samantha said, I'm the Coordinator for Information Literacy Services, as well as a new role that I just accepted last week for the coming year to be Coordinator of Strategic Planning for our library. And so that's been definitely thrown me even more into this area of thinking about discovery and access. So I been very active in this area, having been chairing or co-chairing committee or task force or the like in our library on the topic of discovery and access since 2003. And sometimes people think, well, why is an information literacy person so focused on what is sort of sometimes seen more of a collections issue? But our library has always taken an approach to say that there's a collections focus here, there's an access focus, and specifically our catalogers, and then also there's a user focus. And so my comments will probably focus more around the issues of how do we think about how our users are choosing to interact with our systems and the service layers that we need to build on top of the technology systems that we have available. So I'm really glad to have been able to work on the Horizon report with Samantha and Alex and everyone else and everyone on this team. So I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And what both of us neglected to mention was that Lisa and I got to spend a day together in France for the IFLA conference where we released the report. So I always cherish that time.
Yes, that was fantastic.
It was great. We need to have some more, I think, France sync up soon. And last but not least, we have Mackenzie Smith, a university librarian from the University of California, Davis.
Hi, Samantha. I hope you can hear me. I am the university librarian here at UC Davis, which is the director of the library, after spending close to 30 years working on the East Coast at Harvard and MIT on library technology issues, digital libraries, semantic web, various kinds of research projects related to access and discovery and other library tech issues. So I have an extremely long and varied background in this area. And I wanted to talk particularly today about bringing the user experience forward in libraries and thinking about how we're going to improve access and discovery in a world where users aren't necessarily coming to us first, right? So we all acknowledge that issue, and what can we do about that? And also, one of the luxuries I have as a library director is thinking about the infrastructure of libraries and how it all fits together so that we can improve access and discovery by changing fundamental workflows and infrastructure in libraries. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. Thanks.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Can't wait to hear more from you. Now that we've had introductions and gotten to know each other a little bit, time to move on to our first question. And Lisa, I'm going to kick this one over to you first. What makes increasing access and discovery so important to teaching, learning, and research?
So I think that, you know, as I really think about why discovery is so important is that the library really has unique value-added content that is very important for our users with what they're trying to find. And it's not the only source of content. We should never think that it is. And I think Mackenzie's comments just a second ago really help us frame that thinking for ourselves. But one of the things that we really need to fully understand is how what we are doing is serving the university or college's goals. What is it that our content does that we provide to help people bring in new ideas? Do we create information communities around that? One key thing that I think about a lot is that the library's discovery tools really equalize access for students, particularly those of lesser financial means or who have not had as robust an education. And so some of our students come with great privilege, personal privilege, educational privilege, and the tools that we provide really help equalize that in the sense that we give that access to all students. So really thinking carefully for me about how we interface with the goals of the university and particularly those unique things that we're doing at our institutions.
Thank you, Lisa. And I really like how you wove in the university perspective and how libraries need to be working with universities and being more strongly embedded into their curriculum. I think that's a really important point. Kenning, let's hear your perspective.
Discovery, to me, is integral to teaching and learning. If you can't find information, then you can't synthesize and learn from it. But I'd like to spend a little bit more time talking about the research aspect. Publicly funded research should be discoverable and reusable, but it's often not. Helping to make publicly funded research, such as publications and data sets, discoverable, we think can increase author citation rates. And if libraries can really deliver those increased rates, then I think they're really onto something and will be able to deliver a service that will be highly valued by research and faculty on campus. But doing that means learning how to optimize metadata for machine readability and comprehension. And traditionally, libraries have focused on human metadata. The library world also developed and used standards and protocols that aren't widely accepted on the internet or widely used. We developed standards like TEI and AD and Dublin Core and OAI PMH that aren't used outside of libraries. And consequently, our collections and research are hard to find because search engines don't know how to deal with those standards. As an example, Google stopped using OAI PMH to harvest from libraries in 2008 because it said that the amount of resources that they had to put into dealing with it were not worth the return. And because OAI PMH isn't even, well, Google Scholar has told us since Core in our institutional repositories, can't present bibliographs very well.
Thank you so much, Kenning. I actually think that you raised part of the challenge of this issue, which is creating standards for information and searching for information. In a landscape of rapidly evolving technology, it's really hard to create standards one day and see them be obsolete the next.
Well, or not just create the standards, but get in line and adopt standards that other industries are using on the internet.
Absolutely, another really great point. I'd love to hear your perspective too on this, Lambert.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, I want to pick up on something what Kenning said. I was just today here in Lüneburg at a conference called the Post-Digital Scholar and discussed similar issues with scientists from the digital humanities. And somebody from the audience raised the point, okay, you always stress the importance of metadata and standards and so on, but why do we need this? When we have full text access to everything, we don't need that because we can simply search everything. And I guess in a way, this is a typical misunderstanding on the surface. Today, everything is very easy, yes? You have Google, you have like the media scientists, Clay Shirky put it, publishing is not more a profession, but it's a click of a button. Yeah, that's the impression. Everything is easy. But I would argue it's exactly the opposite. Yes, it's more complicated than ever. Take, for example, just very, very simple example, the decision where to publish. Yes, for a young scholar to this decision, which journal fits to my article, this is not so easy, yes? And to think about this dimension of open access and how open a journal should be and what exactly is the added value for me personally, this is not so easy. So I guess in some way advice from information professionals is now more needed than ever. And this is not only one-to-one advice business like, okay, let's speak to the individual researcher, but it's more like, okay, we have to look into the new digital research habits and practices and cultivate something, yes? Because this is all new. We are only in the very early steps of a huge development, what I would call the onlineification of science, yes? And I think it would be great for everybody involved when independent information specialists like those people working in libraries are yes, actively engaged in this development.
Thanks, Lambert. I think I already see trending on Twitter now, onlineification of science. That's a great term. I love it. I'm going to steal it. Mackenzie, love to hear your perspective on the importance of this topic for teaching, learning, and research as well.
Of course. Access and discovery is fundamental, really, for both learning and research, although I think there are slightly different challenges for us and I guess I would characterize those as external access and discovery versus internal. So For education, for teaching and learning, I think students today are really desperate for help. Access and discovery are so easy now that that's not really the challenge for them. It's what we call sense making or orienteering through all of that content that they can get to at the click of a button. So we really need to find ways to engage with students in particular to help them process what they're getting rather than actually discover it, right? And that would mean things like watermarks of quality for things that they're finding out on the web, right? It used to be that if you found something in a library, you had some sense of the quality of it as a research or teaching content. So now we need ways of injecting that kind of library quality filter on top of what students are finding through Google and other resources. So that's one set of issues we have. And then on the other side, for research, I think several of my colleagues here have already mentioned that we need to step up to making institutionally provided content much more findable and accessible online. And I would put that well beyond open access to scholarly journal articles and talk about all the other kinds of content that researchers are producing at institutions now, like data, software, websites, databases, all the things that they produce as part of their research. The library has a key role in making that discoverable and accessible online and promoting the institution. So we have a lot of work to do. Thanks.
Sounds promising, even though there is a lot of work to be done. And speaking of the work that needs to be done, we can't talk about some of the excitement and things happening around this trend without also looking at the other side of the coin, some of the nitty-gritty challenges being faced when increasing access and discovery in libraries. So I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the challenges you're seeing in your libraries or you've witnessed at other libraries. Lisa, some challenges that you're seeing.
Sure, thanks, Samantha. I think for me, I often try to think about the challenges instead as opportunity, but I'll try and keep it here in the challenges. I think we've already sort of alluded to so many of the different challenges that there are, but I'll specifically think about the challenges we have, as you will, as a pass-through, if you will, for the content that libraries subscribe to, and I think others on the panel today are better situated to speak to some of the more open data questions, so I'll leave that for them. I've really been thinking a lot about this whole question of, the single interface to everything, and this idea of a central index where the data, and this whole question that was already raised around searching across full text versus if you will, the controlled vocabulary. But one of the things that I think is even more challenging for libraries, to the degree that we are playing, if you will, in this information economy where we're purchasing information on behalf of our user community, is that we're very dependent on that vendor community then, and the competition that exists within that community creates its own challenges for us, in the sense that there's quite a bit of churn about what might even be in a database that we subscribe to. And so content that we think we're providing access to on one day may turn out to fall out on another day due to licensing restrictions or the like. And so really thinking about not just the whole question of can users discover it and how they get access to it, but for the library profession saying, okay, how do we stay engaged, if you will, with the information content industry and articulate our needs into that industry, and also, if you will, I'm going to go a little bit more provocative even, and say demand what we need from that industry, so that we also say certain practices are actually not going to be acceptable to us in the databases that we license or the tools that we get. So I don't mean that in an adversarial way, but I think in an advocacy way. The question of, we're multi-million dollars across the academic libraries just in the United States, much less the whole world. And so that is a financial power and should have some influence on what the market offers to us. So thinking about that and how we interact there, I think, is a very interesting question for us, that sits alongside of those questions of open and then how we provide access to materials being created on our campus. So, which I think I'll turn over maybe to someone else to address some of those issues.
Well said, Lisa. Really well said. And if anyone wants to even begin to answer some of those questions, or if the audience, you have a point of view on that, would love to hear it in the Twitter back channel or in the unified chat. Really great, provocative questions. Thank you, Lisa. Over to you, Kenning. Love to hear your perspective on challenges for this trend.
Well, I really like the way there are huge opportunities facing us. Libraries talk a lot about how we should be in charge of organizing research data because organizing information is what we're traditionally good at, but I'm not sure that we've really proven ourselves in this arena yet. Go back to what some of the other speakers were talking about with in terms of controlled vocabulary versus full text searching. And I agree completely that a controlled vocabulary is a much more accurate way to search, but it has to be a controlled vocabulary that search engines use. The fact of the matter is that the people are out there using the search engine. They're not in the libraries using the databases unless they get referred there. So all the controlled vocabularies that we build internally, they have really limited use, I think, with. So the other thing I'd like to say is that we're a pretty conservative profession, I think. And as an example, I think many of us are just coming out of a long period of warning people away from using Google and warning them away from using Wikipedia. Although I think that's still quite prevalent. If you go and do a search on Google for Wikipedia quotative source, you'll get a whole lot of library-created websites that tell people basically not to use Wikipedia. And I think that's been a big mistake. But it's also an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to change, because the aversion to Wikipedia has caused us to fall behind in helping machines to understand us and our products and services. Wikipedia is a trusted data source for search engines. It's not just about putting accurate information into Wikipedia. It's about defining our organizations and our products and services in Wikipedia. It comes down to this difference, this argument that you've heard before between strings and things. If we continue to rely on search engines to draw conclusions from strings of our text, we'll be severely handicapped in the internet. Because the internet is rapidly moving toward established and trusted entities. We refer to these entity definitions as semantic identity, and if your organization doesn't have a semantic identity, then the traffic that's driven to it from Google search engines is going to be limited, because Google doesn't know for certain whether you exist. Likewise, the machine understandable definition of library products is very limited at the moment, as is the machine understandable of definition of institutional repository, for instance. So I think the huge opportunity is doing a lot more to define our product services in trusted data sources like Wikipedia, Wikipedia, Freebase, Google My Places, etc., because that helps machines understand those products and services as established entities and allow them to start to connect in the linked data world.
Thank you so much, Kenning. Really well said. And just to build a little bit on some of the things you were discussing, like with Wikipedia, there really is an opportunity. I know that there are 33 million Wikipedia pages right now, and I think over 21 million users. So clearly people are turning into it for convenience and for ease of use. So rather than, going in the opposite direction and having an adversarial role with Wikipedia and similar services, I think we're starting to see an increase in examples of major library organizations embarking on partnerships with these types of services. So I just want to point out the OCLC's new partnership with Wikipedia. They're addressing something that might be perceived as disappointing with Wikipedia, lack of credible citations. So OCLC is actually working with Wikipedia in order to provide contributors with the most accurate citations and as many accurate citations as possible. So actually I think it's looking like some libraries and library organizations are feeling a social responsibility to at least try and confirm or help out with the accuracy of Wikipedia and similar services. So just one observation I had to share. And Lambert, I'd love to hear more from you on some of the challenges you're seeing and maybe even some potential solutions to overcoming them.
Yes, thank you. I would like to extend on this Wikipedia topic because I think it's a great topic to talk about in terms of yeah, new possibilities or things we should do. I mean, maybe many of you know already about this Wikipedian in residence programs. Many libraries and galleries, archives, and so on have already this kind of partnerships, and this is a very good idea because it's a mutual thing. It's not enough that we as information experts go into Wikipedia and leave our footprint there, but we need to learn something from them and then work together, because it's not too easy to understand how Wikipedia works and the role of the authors communities. Yes, and I would argue that we are right now building some kind of a new research operating system that is very open and connected and net-based, but it's mostly not a technical question. I mean, okay, we need all these standards, we need metadata and so on. This is at least we here would we argue that this is all very helpful. But the main challenge, from my point of view, are these social matters like trust. Yes, we need to show Wikipedia authors that we can add something, and then again we need to learn from them, and then this can be very, very good, because as was already said, Wikipedia is right now, or since many years, the 5th most popular website in the world. Yes, and for many people it's really the starting point when you need to learn something new. And one last thing, let me add this. We have here in Germany Research Alliance Science 2.0, and Wikimedia is part of that, and our library is also part of that, and we are like 20 different research institutions and libraries, and we did a survey and asked, among other questions, German scientists if and how they use Wikipedia, and it turned out, you would never guess that, scientists who read Wikipedia for their research, not for personal reasons, but explicitly for their research, it's like 95%. Yes, and you really have to think about that, because I mean, okay, maybe not for the narrower field for their own research, maybe, but a typical German researcher, if he encounters a topic that he's maybe not so familiar with, he or she turns then, as the first guess, maybe to Wikipedia, or at least it sounds so. And we have to take this really seriously, and it makes no sense to argue in a moral way about it, that you should not do it or something, but really to take this as a positive challenge and an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lambert. I think collective intelligence has been a Horizon Project topic for many years now, and some might argue that Wikipedia is a form of, or evidence of the rise of collective intelligence, and open at that. So really interesting points that you've made. I want to give the floor right now to Mackenzie. Mackenzie, do you have anything to add to the challenges conversation?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that we've gotten onto Wikipedia as a topic here, because I also have a librarian here, Phoebe Ayers, who's a longtime Wikipedian, a Wikipedian in residence for UC Davis, and a member of the Wikimedia Foundation's Board of Directors. So maybe engagement with sites like Wikipedia and Google is really a sign of institutions that are moving in this direction and overcoming some of the challenges. Because I think the way I would characterize the problem, the fundamental problem, is that we don't really have a culture of innovation in libraries, which is dangerous in an environment or a time like this, right? And where I see that is not so much in the kinds of projects that you're hearing about today from these panelists who are all doing really cool things, but if you look at the bread and butter operations of libraries, they still look very similar to the way they looked in the 60s. And I think that, in some ways we were ahead of the technology curve in the library field by inventing standards like MARC. And, that has actually hurt us now, because we have become very sclerotic in our approach to changing the back-end systems. So we really need to change our culture to be a little bit more experimental and innovative across the entire library, and think about scale and what really needs to happen at an individual library versus on the internet in an environment like Wikipedia or OCLC or the Digital Public Library of America. So it's that shifting the culture to be more risk tolerant and get a little bit further away from these time-tested standards. So you've got things like BibFrame coming in to potentially replace MARC. BibFrame is a linked data standard, and it has a lot of potential to move us in this direction, but you don't see a lot of libraries jumping on that because they just have so much invested in the old technology. So that's a real challenge.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. I really love your point about fostering a culture of innovation in libraries, and I would like to challenge the audience, between now and the next panel on Twitter later tonight, whenever you're thinking about it, how libraries can better foster a culture of innovation, both virtually and physically in the library space. So, great question. I know we're running a little bit low on time, so I'm going to ask the panelists one final question. And so I'm going to start off with Lisa and kick it over to her when I ask for further details on how this topic is materializing at your libraries, and maybe what are some of the tools and resources you're using to increase access and discovery, and maybe any good examples that you have for the audience. Lisa, over to you.
Great. Well, I think the importance of this issue at my library and really at every library that I see is underscored by the immense attention that this topic is getting. And also, interestingly, I might say sort of how fast, if you will, the library profession has been to adopt a particular approach to discovery, which is to purchase the discovery layers. So we know that from the Ithaca faculties, or the Ithaca Library Directors Survey this year, there were results sort of showing essentially almost complete market penetration compared to a couple years ago, and library directors saying that having market share, if you will, of the starting point for research be the library as a really key component for their strategy going forward. So I think the evidence is there. There's a lot of attention to this issue. I think the other evidence is there is that we're not, and this is where Mackenzie and I will come back together, that we're not fully succeeding with our goals in this. So I think we're trying a number of things, but the evidence of our users relying more and more on, if you will say, web scale, true web scale solutions like Google Scholar is there. And so really thinking carefully as a result of, well, what is the unique value added proposition for the academic library in this environment? So we're in a competitive environment with these other providers. What part will we own and compete for in this, and how will we help our users as they do go out to use these web scale environments and need to engage in those information tools that may not have all of the quality controls that we provide to them in the library, but clearly users are saying what you do provide isn't meeting my needs. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and personally I think it's a very exciting time to be doing this work.
Oh, thank you so much for that. For that, really well said. I'd like to pass it on over to Mackenzie now.
I think I agree with everything Lisa just said, and I'll just mention a couple of things that I'm working on that I think are relevant, because I'm really concerned that we kind of tackle some of the really fundamental root problems that we have now. So two projects that I'm working on, which I'm hoping to engage this community in more in the future, is an IMLS project to look at library technology infrastructure and how it can evolve towards using linked data as a fundamental part of our infrastructure instead of some of the older standards. So that's a project called BibFlow. And we're really hoping to produce a roadmap for how the library IT infrastructure environment can evolve into a sort of web 21st century infrastructure. And the second project is a personal favorite of mine, which is getting the library community off the current model of access control for licensed resources, which is just so horrible. And we need to get towards more of the European model of shibboleth-based access control so that users can get to the things that we're licensing. I think a lot of the pushback we're getting is that it's just too hard. And Lisa mentioned this in her opening remarks, that we have to push back more on the vendor community and make this easier for people to get the benefit of what we're already paying for. So those are kind of my priorities right now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. And I want to toss this question over back to Kenning, and I know he'll have some really good insights to add to this discussion.
So in terms of what we're doing at Montana State University, we've just finished our first IMLS grant, which was awarded in 2011, and that focused on search engine optimization and some semantic web research. And now we've just been funded by IMLS for continued research for another 3 years, with partnerships at OCLC Research, ARL, and the University of New Mexico. And this time we're trying to measure the impact of digital libraries. It's called, the grant is called Measuring Up. And we're also using our institutional repository and other digital library projects to test and demonstrate the theories that we've developed during the IMLS research in the first grant and now upcoming in the second one. So for example, we've incorporated Highwire press tags into our institutional repository as recommended by Google Scholar instead of Dublin Core for better harvesting and indexing. We've built a data model for schema.org for theses and dissertations in our IR and implemented it. We've prototyped a semantic visualization graph of researcher expertise. We're experimenting with social media optimization to demonstrate impact. And we're working with a center on campus, the Center for Biofilm Engineering, to map out a set of services around semantic web optimization so that their work is more visible on the web. And we think that this is part of the new roles of librarians in developing sets of services like this that can be offered to numerous entities on campus. We're also involved with the OCLC Wikipedia library project that Samantha mentioned. So we're hosting an established Wikipedia editor as an affiliate to our library, and we continue to push our findings. We recently published an article on what we're calling new knowledge work for librarians, and we just submitted a chapter on IR discovery that will appear in a book published by the Purdue University Press in a few months.
Oh, thank you so much, Kenning. It's been a pleasure having you on the panel and hearing your insights. Let's get the final word now from Lambert.
Yes, thank you. We just recently, for example, started a so-called AV portal. This is kind of an YouTube for scientists, where scientists can upload their videos and they are then semantically analyzed and then can be cited on the second with a DOI and so on. And we guess this kind of services, even if they are prototypes. In 2 weeks we start another service like that. That will be network researcher profiles from one particular research area where we want to show some of the potentials of linked data. We use a software called Vivo, and we want to show that even without large commercial players like ResearchGate, we can have this added value of showing more deeply the activity of researchers and how they go together, visualize things and so on. And all this kind of activities can only happen, and maybe this is my last proposal to you and to the audience, that when we get out of this mindset that everything that we as libraries do has to be a strong connection to our collections and our inventory. I mean, often good ideas come out of the idea, okay, we have to take care of the cultural heritage and take that to the digital age and so on. But I think we have to reserve some kind of lab environment where very new ideas can come up that must not always be related to our collections, and that not always must end up in an absolutely stable, productive new library service, but just like a space where you can try things and say, okay, this is only a beta, but together with you, our users, or you, maybe the Wikipedia author community or you researcher community, we will try this kind of things, and we need to make such a kind of a more lab-like or startup-like environment inside of our libraries. And I think this would be for many libraries huge to have a space like that. We in Hanover only just starting to use this kind of stuff and trying to make something out of it.
Well, really eloquently articulated. Thank you, Lambert. Just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, although I really hope it continues long after this, is a common thread I'm hearing is creating space and room for experimentation, you know, potentially making mistakes, trying things along the way. And one thing that strikes me about the library, the academic and research library community in particular, is since releasing this report, I've gotten to travel and talk to a number of libraries and library professionals, and it seems to be a community that's really open to having these really hard conversations, which is always, you know, the best start to be able to have these conversations and to be aware of issues and aware of where the trends are going. So I have to say thank you to all the panelists for being open and for, you know, talking about the challenges they're facing and the things that they're working on, and let's keep these conversations going. Thank you so much, everyone. Much appreciated, and I'll pass it back to our lovely hosts.
Okay, so we went a little bit over, but that's fine. We have about 9 minutes left before our next session, so we're going to take some time to switch out our panelists and get set for our last but not least panel discussion for the day. So as I have been doing throughout the morning, I guess it's afternoon now, I'm going to pose another question to you. Why is access and discovery important for teaching, learning, and research? What is your take on that? Please make sure to use a unified chat for that, and I'll switch that over in just a moment.